Hello and good evening and welcome to another episode of Law and Order. Like every week, this week too, we have a very special topic to discuss with you or to bring to you with a special guest on it. And the area that I'm going to discuss today is an area which we haven't discussed or which is not discussed in much of the forums that even discusses things of law. My area is called laws relating to a value chain, or you would have heard this phrase, logistics. What is the law that relates to logistics and how do we get about it? It's a very timely topic, and I've got a special guest on that who is an expert on that. That is none other than Dr. Dan Malika Gunasekera, who is a specialist in the area of logistics and laws relating to value chain. Dan, thank you very much for coming back to the studio. You're no stranger to...
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
It's a pleasure. You're no stranger to this program. So let's start on with the very basic thing. People know about this as a lay word. What is the term or what is the meaning of logistics?
Actually, Chanakya, this term logistics have come to the forefront in the present business world. Though the word survived for many centuries, especially in the military context. Now, if you look at the word logistics, I don't find any exact definitive definition to this word. Because one may say that it's the activity, commercial activity of transporting goods. It is more than transporting goods. Because as a matter of fact, logistics means everything that is connected with a making of product until it goes to the final consumer. Everything connected to this process are parts of logistics. And if we go back to the history, we can find that in the context of military affairs, this was referred as organizing troops, accommodation, and other necessary things for the forces who are at war. But the most modern definition that one could ever find is that it says it's a complex organization of things and other associated areas, especially in a commercial activity, such as trade, may it be local, may it be international. So everything that are connected to this trade are called logistics.
Right. Now, how does this operate? I mean, that is a very wide definition. I mean, we can get an idea. Operate in national and international sphere. Give me first, how does it operate here in Sri Lanka?
Yeah.
In a business sense.
I think, first of all, everything in the trade and business occurs with a contract, whether it may be a verbal contract or a written contract. So therefore, the starting point would be law relating to contracts. And thereafter, when a sales contract is made, the next important point is how to deliver the goods from the seller to the buyer. So in a national context, we know that delivering, of course, is not a huge problem, because it is either you deliver by hand or by using a kind of a courier service or by using some kind of land transportation. But when it comes to international trade, we know that Sri Lanka being an island, if we enter into international trade with another country, obviously we will have to transport the goods either by way of sea or by way of air. But that would be not the same case when it comes to transboundary transportation in landlocked countries, such as in the European Union, where there are several other modes of transportation, such as rail transportation, road transportation. So if we take everything together, this transportation means involved in the logistics process is quite interconnected with what we call multimodal transportation.
Right. When you have differing, I might just deviate a little to get a more clear view, differing transport modes like sea, air, when you say multimode, I think we are coming into multimode transport in Sri Lanka as well. That is rail and land transport. Are there laws that clash with these areas, which affect the logistic flow?
It's a good point. Actually, when it comes to international trade on carriage of goods by sea, there are a number of international conventions that apply, such as starting from 1924, the Hague Rules on carriage of goods by sea, or laws relating to bills of lading. And then we saw an amendment that came in 1968 to the Hague Rules called the Hague-Visby Rules. And thereafter the Hamburg Rules in 1978, and then the newest one is called Rotterdam Rules of 2008. All these rules apply to the carriage of goods by sea. And in Sri Lanka in particular, we being a party to the Hague-Visby Rules, we have enacted our own law called the Carriage of Goods by Sea Act, which is number 21 of 1982. So this particular area apply to carriages of goods that occur by the use of the sea, mainly in maritime transportation. When it comes to air transportation, there are a number of, again, international conventions, such as the Warsaw Convention of 1929 that was amended in 1955, and further by protocol of 1999 called the Montreal Protocol. But however, there is no Sri Lankan law as such that applies locally to the air transportation, but air transportation of goods have been well regulated in Sri Lanka.
Okay. Now you mentioned about few international conventions and some new ones. Are we signatory to all these things?
We are signatory to, as I told you, when it comes to carriage of goods by sea, we are a signatory to the Hague-Visby Rules, which is an amendment to the Hague Rules of 1924. And when it comes to the carriage of goods by air, we are party to the Warsaw Convention that was amended in 1955, but we were a party to the original Warsaw Convention. I think we signed that in 1949, and the corresponding local legislation was adopted in around 1979 or 1997 rather. So therefore, these two areas of carriage, Sri Lanka is a party, and our law is quite unified and harmonized with regard to that.
Right. If I may stress the law, coming to the law relating to logistics, can you give me, taking all these things together, the ingredients of law relating to logistics?
Yeah, the most important ingredient in logistics is that it all evolves with a contract.
Right.
So therefore, the law of contract is very important. Now, in the law of contract, the most important contract that the logistics is involved with is the contract of carriage. So there has to be a contract of carriage between the buyer of a product with the carrier. It may be a sea carrier, it may be air carrier, or it may be a road or rail carrier. So with whom the carriage takes place, the buyer of the product has to enter into a contract to bring the goods to his place. Or it could be the other way, that the carriage is done between the sender or the seller and the carrier. So it all depends on the contract that the buyer and the seller makes. And in that particular contract of carriage, there are so many important areas or ingredients that the parties have to enter into. When it comes to the contract of carriage, the most important thing is that the vehicle that carry the goods need to be in fit and proper order. We say in the sea carriage sector, the particular ship has to be seaworthy. Otherwise, there is no way of carrying the goods by an unworthy ship. And when it comes to air carriage, the particular aircraft has to be airworthy. And it's the same situation when it comes to road carriage or rail carriage. The particular vehicles have to be fit and proper to operate this carriage obligation. And thereafter, there are certain other important clauses that the parties have to enter in the carriage contract. And we can discuss when we go ahead with this discussion.
Yeah. Shall we discuss that now?
Yeah, I think, yes.
Yeah.
The most important things is that when the particular carrier and the sender of the goods enter into a contract of carriage, there are areas that the contract must cover, particularly to safeguard the interests of both these parties, such as that the liabilities of the carrier, which are very important, that the liabilities are based on laws of negligence mainly, where the carrier should have a duty of care, and if there is a breach of duty and a resultant damage, the owner of the goods or the sender will have a right to sue the particular carrier for damages or losses. So therefore, the liability section is very important. While you give or while you impose a liability on the carrier also needs to be well protected in exonerating his liability in a situation where the carrier himself is not liable for a certain carriage, where he has not done anything wrong, but maybe that there was certain other third-party involvement that has caused loss or damage. So there are certain areas that the carrier himself need to be exonerated, and also to perhaps sometimes to limit his liabilities, which protects the trade, because always the carrier needs to be protected. If you take the carriage of goods by sea, we know that the ship owners put ships in a dangerous affair. It's not easy to put a ship at sea. So therefore, as a means of encouraging people to engage in sea transportation, we need to afford these carriers some sort of comfort for them to limit their liability, so that end of the day they don't fall into any bankruptcy issues, that they would still continue with the trade in order to facilitate the movement of these goods by sea. So likewise, it all apply to this entire value chain, irrespective of which mode that you engage your carriage obligation.
Right. Now, does any example come to your mind, something that has been a problem?
In the nature of?
In the nature of this loss that you explained and the carriage of carriage contract.
Yeah. I think there are so many examples that we can give. But I talked about this, the proper fit and proper nature that a vehicle should have.
Right.
If I take an example of the seaworthiness factor that I took with regard to a ship, generally the law is that a ship should be seaworthy at the commencement of a transportation process, carriage of goods by sea. So at that time, a ship starts to float. The ship needs to be seaworthy. There is a very famous case called Hong Kong Fur versus Kawasaki Kishin Kaisha. I think you might have heard of this very famous ship called K-Line, or shipping agent, shipping line, K-Line. So there was a very interesting case that happened where the particular ship owned by this K-Line, the crew and especially the master of a crew was not competent to carry the ship or take the ship to the sea. And in that particular case, there were a lot of losses and damage claims that were brought against this line. And it was found that the ship's seaworthiness does not relate only to the technical aspects or voyage aspects, but also to the competency of the seafarers. where they have to be competent to make a ship seaworthy. So it's a very interesting area that any vehicle pertaining to transportation by sea or by air or by rail or by road, the particular vehicle needs to be fit and proper to engage in such a transportation.
You're watching Law and Order, and my guest today is Dr. Dan Malika Gunasekera, and the topic is a very important topic, law relating to value chain or logistics. In international trade, there's this term called payment against documents. How does this work apply in a scenario like you said?
I think it's a very important question, Chanakya, because you know that sometimes, or most of the times rather, a particular exporter from one country and an importer from another country, they don't meet at all, or they don't even see each other. Yeah. Fortunately, we have now all this technology like Skype and other things that you can converse with the other party. But in multinational trade, the heads of a company or a establishment will never see the other party when they are dealing with business. So therefore, the international trade mainly exists with the transferring of documents, and documents transferring against the money of the other party. So this is what we call documents or trade against the documents, and all the money transactions and goods transactions are all done by transferring of these documents, mainly through the banks and other financial organizations that facilitate these trade aspects, such as giving loan facilities or letters of credit, what we call LCs, and other things. So therefore, nowadays international trade are mainly based on the documents. The most important thing in that is that all these documents have to be very perfected, such as the sales contract, the commercial invoice, or if we take the carriage contract that I told you, they all have to be very perfected, and all these clauses in contracts have to be properly entered into.
Okay. Now all this can be in place, like you said, the law is in place, the contract is in place, everything is looked into. But invariably what happens, as we know, dealing with humans, there's a breach or there's a non-performance. So what are the remedies available in a contract like this for breach or non-delivery, damage, loss, and we have this term called short delivery also. What would be the remedies, if you were to tell it in short?
Yes, actually there are, as I told you, there are certain laws that apply, such as the law of contract. And when there is a loss or damage in such a situation, or misdelivery, short delivery, or whatever, you name it, if your goods are at danger or it has experienced certain danger, then the law that we can apply is a law of contracts or law of tort. If it relates to a loss or damage that has occurred based on the breach of a contract, then it's the law of contract that we can apply. Or otherwise, if there is a loss or damage that has caused outside the contract, we can still apply the law of tort or law of delicts, where we could call the law of negligence in that case. But also there may be situations that where the strict liability applies, if particularly the carrier himself caused damage with intention to cause damage. In such a situation, that limitation of liability also loses. The right to limit also loses, as I told you. So therefore, all these laws pertaining to that subject applies. And one of the new areas in logistics is what we call the reverse logistics.
Yes.
What happens if...
I was to come to that question next. Yeah, tell me.
What happens if a particular buyer of goods refuses to accept the goods when it goes to the other jurisdiction? Are we going to bring it back, or are we going to sell it at that particular jurisdiction abroad? So these are all relating to reverse logistics.
What really happens there? It's a very good point you mentioned. But
this is a very new development, in fact, because in reverse logistics, what happened is that if a particular buyer of a goods refuse to accept the goods, maybe due to the fact that the goods have not arrived on time, or not, that the goods